Hi, this is Karen Hamilton from Sacred Seven Healing. Today, I would like to look at a concept of good versus evil, or Christ versus Satan, or Shiva versus Vishnu. And I wanted to, and there's other deities that have a similar polarity. I believe that right now in the world, we are going through obviously a very chaotic change. And I do believe that there are certain energies representing certain ideologies of an individual or a deity, and what we could perceive sometimes as being very corrupt, evil, and dysfunctional. Uh, if it's balanced in another polarity where there is a positive aspect of rebirth and potential and great truth and awakening, you can, my dog's going into another room, you can have a balance between the two polarities. And that would be taking two aspects and bringing them in to centrify an understanding and completing two polarities and balancing and harmonizing, which is really what the yin and yang is all about. So right now, I believe we're in a place of change. What some people may perceive as, energies that are happening or disruptive and difficult to deal with is the process of change. And it can be looked at as an evil thing. But in fact, really what it could be doing is opening the door for very positive and potentially powerful changes to come that would be necessary for the preservation of humanity and the species and the planet and whatever that is. So it's taking a look at a greater picture and trying to see the two aspects coming together to make a greater whole. And we can choose a polarity, we can choose a side, but it's better to understand that there needs to be both aspects in some respect to create balance. In order to see what change is needed, you need to see the darkness. To see what is positive and could be beneficial, you need to see the light. You cannot see the truth and the light without the darkness. And that is the balancing of understanding between one thing and another. You do have to understand that all of us have within us, whether you want to accept this truth or not, darkness and light. We all have those positive and negative polarities within the body that can create a very dark way of looking at things, or can create a very lightening positive thing. It's important to remember that when you're whole, you, through your heart, understand that there are both these aspects, and they go on outside of you in the world and all the things that you see, and they also go on within you in your own personal world. And the world is a reflection a lot of times of what's within you. You're reflecting it out, it's being reflected back. And that's the case for every single person. They're having many aspects of things reflected to them, and some they want to accept, some they don't. But that's the part of understanding and knowing who you are. And the outward change sometimes is what's necessary to force the inward change, and to understand how to balance yourself spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Sometimes we need to go through these changes, and we can look at them as a very dark and negative thing, that there's, looks like there's all this chaos and that sort of thing. And yes, there is negative aspects to what happens when there is a change. But if you can try to shift your mind and look at as much as you can of what positive could come out of this for all of us as a humanity, and individually as for yourself, it can help push the positive energy further forward. And we as a species can take on and do things to help each other and make things better, that maybe somebody is struggling. Well, you can do things to help them. Maybe there's people that are homeless, and there might be, you have a place that they could sleep or you could help them. And obviously you want to do that safely. If you have a family, you have to think about these things. But if there is a way to make a difference, maybe we can think about that. There are a lot of homes that are very large. I've watched videos even that are all abandoned. And, you know, maybe some of these homes could actually be used for people that are homeless. They could be set up in such a way that would help them. But I don't necessarily have all the answers. And I think there's a lot of people that might be more of an expert in these areas than me. But my point of what I'm trying to say is that many times we go through life and we want to only believe that we are good and that we are never a negative person. But that is not a realistic truth. And as long as you're not willing to look at the dark parts of who you are, you really aren't a good person. The way you become a good person is really by recognizing that you have both these aspects and to try to alchemize them together to become a greater you, a greater person, so that you may not be perfect, but you're not so far in one direction thinking that you're a saintly person of perfection, because there is no real such thing. So if you can understand how important it is to balance the body, balance the mind, balance the spirit, there's 5 layers of energy. If you can harmonize those layers and create within the heart a better you, then what you reflect to the world becomes a light of greater potential of positive energy. And and again, you cannot create a higher level of positiveness until you recognize and alchemize those darker parts of yourself. And it doesn't mean that all darkness is bad, because we do need that to reflect to us what that is. And I know that there's many spiritual teachings that teach you must get rid of all ego, but I believe that the ego, if it's in balance, is a mirror of reflecting that which you need to change about yourself. And as long as you are receiving it appropriately, you can use it to better yourself. You can use it as your voice of, I need to change. I just saw myself doing this. It wasn't a good thing, and I need to work through that. But you can't truly know yourself as a person until you are willing to look at all aspects of who you are. And many people live in denial. They want to believe that everything they do is just utter perfection, and that's not the case. All of us have different parts of who we are. So the whole concept of Vishnu being, the light bringer, and the warrior for the light, and or Satan being the dark person and Christ being the good person, just understand that those are really both aspects of you. Now, there are some people that will take on more of one aspect than the other, and they are out of balance. And this is what the false light is when you are not balanced and harmonizing, recognizing the importance of, there are these 2 aspects of life. There's 2 polarities that are necessary to keep us upright and balanced. And that is knowing that there is this darkness, but controlling to a certain degree those aspects of self. Now, I know there's lots of people that believe that, by being dark and sacrificing and doing all these things, I'm helping to balance the light. But that is actually, again, a false illusion. Because when you're in the perfected state of consciousness, you within self are perfectly harmonized between light and dark. And you realize that you do not need to do sacrifice and ritual abuse and some of these other things that are going on in the world right now in order to find your truth. That's the false light. So when you're in the higher living light, you recognize that balance and the yin and yang and the bringing together of the 2 forces of energy is really what makes you whole. That's what makes you a greater force of change within self. And if you can hold those energies in the heart, that really is what I believe to be the Ark of the Covenant. And that is your covenant between the living light, which could be the force of the Godhead, prime creation, and you being able to aspectly and look at both parts of yourself and mirror when there's out of balance positive, too much positive, and you're just so perfect, that's not a good energy either. When I'm too dark, that's not a good energy either. It's bringing both those energies. And the only way you can really know or test that within self is by looking within and measuring everything within the heart. And your heart never lies to you. Your mind can lie to you. Your mind, if you're taking what's ego and putting it up here and avoiding this place, then you're convincing yourself that you're perfect and everything's great and my life's fantastic. And that is the illusion. That's the deception. And the only way you cannot be deceived is by weighing it in the heart and taking a closer look at yourself and how you resonate to others. And there will be those that don't resonate with you, and that's okay too, because maybe they haven't weighed their energy. And so it's all about us finding maybe groups that we fit in with, but at any time we can look at ourselves within a group and realize we really don't resonate with that group. And that's because we've realized me or you, needs to go through a transformation. We need to go through a change because what was working at one time is no longer serving us. And that's part of the process of the awakening, is recognizing where we're out of balance and where we need to bring things back home and harmonize with ourselves within our heart. And it isn't that difficult. It's really, again, the world's slowed down. We've got this time to look at where we are at in the world and where we want to be. And we can really take this time to go deeper within ourselves, to ask and weigh. And that is the balance of the two scales, is really our own judgment is far more powerful than some other judgment coming from outside of ourselves. But there are times in the world where there are forces of energy that, in order to, because people are refusing to change, people are not awakening, people are not doing what they need to be doing to become better or to grow. Sometimes there is trigger points in a society or in a group that needs to happen in order to bring about the transformation of people, because people will get stuck in a pattern and they refuse to change and move away from that. And that is really what evolution is the recognition of the necessity for something new. That's really how we evolve, and that's why we need to evolve. And if we don't evolve, we stagnate and we die. And that's really what happens. So again, it's seeing the world as a bit of a mirror, reflecting that within self, testing everything within the heart, realizing that ego is okay, but it needs to be kept in balance because it cannot be your controller. If your heart is not the controller, you're not connected to your higher consciousness and your higher state of existence and receiving all the forces of energy around your body that preserve your body and keep you in the field of light that balances and stabilizes you and keeps you as the upright being receiving the light and higher consciousness. So the ego can be used, but when you process information as it comes through the lower forces, whether it's sexual energy or whatever it is, if you're not processing it through the heart, you're out of balance. And then you see what happens when all these different people are just randomly having sex everywhere. Well, what happens is people start getting sick. They get diseases. They get all kinds of problems. Then they have mental problems because they're upset and the boyfriend cheated on me. And, you know, if we would all just take this time to balance and harmonize our fire energy, our ego-based energy, processing it through the heart energy, seeing things through the eyes of the heart. This is your third eye. These are your eyes. This is your third eye. This is not your third eye. This is. Only when this is connected can this inner eye be connected. So you have to be processing properly through this energy sector. This is one of the most important parts, and it is the central hub of where all energy moves through the body. So if you're processing and skipping that place, what happens is you create blocks and all kinds of problems, and the mind refuses then to look at where you're going and the truth. It just goes. It just is like a batting ram, just plowing through life, not thinking about how destructive it might be. And so if you balance and look within the heart, you can use that ego to assist you, and then you can then look at yourself and realize, am I just bashing my way through life, or am I on my path of where I need to be, and do I need to tweak and make changes to readjust so that I can stay on some kind of a linear path? And it's okay to deviate a little bit. And I do believe that, there's 3 different pathways, and they probably all lead about to the same direction. But there is one path that could be a little bit easier if you learn to listen to the heart. If you learn to receive things through the heart, then you know right away when something isn't right for you. You use the lower energies. It goes into the gut. The gut is another sensory place of reception where when you get those feelings of something's not feeling right, process it quickly through the heart and ask yourself, well, what is it I'm feeling? Why isn't this feeling right? If you know yourself enough, you will have an answer instantly, and then the mind can act to take you out of that situation or put you in a different situation. So there's so many aspects to being in a balanced, harmonized state, and realizing that there is good and evil in a sense, because there is dark and light, or light and dark, however you want to look at it. But if it is out of balance, that's when it really becomes out of control, and then that's when it's harming of others and taking away other people's free will. It's okay to have different aspects of self, but again, if it's not resonating with the heart, then you're not doing right. You're not being righteous. And righteous doesn't mean always being correct. It just means weighing things to see what resonates with you and what is truth. And many people, depending on how they're raised, like, Luciferians and some of these other groups, they were raised that what is left is right and what's right is left. And they've never learned to process anything through the heart center. Everything is outside of the heart. The heart is the last place they ever look at. And so they really, in some ways, become very chaotic, psychotic, lacking compassion, doing things and it doesn't even make sense because they didn't process through the heart, but they look at everything as power, control. And if I have power and control, then I don't have to feel within here. And so it's a full disconnect from the most important part, and that is this space. And I know they believe that they understand everything will be processed back through here, but that is not the way it works. If you're too far one way and you're doing ritual sacrifice and abusing animals and doing things like that, you're out of alignment. And it's because you have not processed your own personal pain, and you're using that pain and placing it within other things to create suffering for others. And then that is going against the universal law, or even the golden rule. I mean, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not harm. I mean, it's going through this world is not that complicated if you stick to a program that is fairly kind and compassionate to others, including yourself. And there are certain sort of mores of life that are helpful. You can choose differently, but they are not helpful. And when they get out of balance, This is where the world has to go into a state of change, because then those thought forms, as they get more higher and more people get involved in that type of negative thought form, it ultimately starts to potentially destroy the original living light and the frequency of light. And, a lot of times they will take on something that I think I mentioned in another video, like the green movement, taking on something that is a very positive thing. And they can very easily manipulate it and turn it into a monetization of something that should have been just an understanding that we all had, so that they gain power over the way that concept's going to be allowed. They will gain power over how your children are going to think about it. They will gain power by forcing people to pay into or buy into, or forcing these changes. Now, it doesn't mean that all those aspects of green are wrong. It just means that we need to use our brain power to look deeper as to whether we are being told the truth. Because a lot of this stuff that's going on with pollution and everything else had nothing to do with us. It had everything to do with the system and those controlling this system. That's really who's doing all the damage. It's not us, human beings. We're just kind of going along for it. If they really cared about the system, and they really cared about us as a humanity and cared about this earth, they wouldn't have monetized and created destruction in all the different fields, whether it be pharmaceutical, whether it be the oil industry, whether it be the food industry, by becoming greedy. And you see how they're out of balance. They're not balanced in the way they look at the bigger picture within themselves. It all becomes about power and wealth and what kind of car you drive, versus what's important for all of us. And when you're balanced, you can see that, and you won't choose to monetize everything. You will look at it as, do I really need all that money? It's okay to be wealthy. It's okay to have that. But at what point do I cut that off, or say, I can continue to gain wealth, but I don't have to do it by hurting other people? And I think that we are in a process right now where this Shiva, or Shiva, whatever side you want, I always feel Shiva's on this side, and Vishnu, or Satan and Christ, have maybe made a decision they got to come together now. I feel we're closer to that. And I don't mean as in the New World Order, because there is a better order of how things can be. But those that are peddling this concept of globalism and the New World Order and that whole agenda is really not, it's not beneficial, because it's serving their greed. They're not really serving the people. It's about them gaining power, gaining control, holding all the technologies, holding all the healing technologies, holding all the information so people don't know what's happening. And then they feel as long as they know what the truth is, it doesn't matter about humanity. And that's not living in the heart. And some of these people may be too far gone in that direction. And so that's where Vishnu or Christ must come in, is that frequency of light of those that are maybe more of the light, more benevolent in how they see themselves and see everyone else in the world, has to create the balance. And so there are times where systems must be destroyed in order to maintain or bring the balance necessary. Anyway, that's enough for today, but I just want you to think about, what is evil and what is good. And, sometimes our perceptions aren't quite exactly correct. So have a wonderful day, and just take some time to think about that and ask yourself where you're at, and see where you're reflecting out there. And you can be the change you want to see. It's your choice. Anyway, I say thank you for listening. If you took the time to listen to this video, have a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is. And I love you, and we will see you next time. Thank you.